Hi everyone, so it is July 2021 right now. It's over halfway through the year and I had a goal to read 52 books this year and I've gotten to 61 so far. I'm currently in the middle of reading 4 or 5 other books that I'll probably finish in the next week, but I figure I would talk about the first 61 books that I've read so far this year. So sorry, my dog's right here. He wants hugs. So the first book I read this year was Basquiat by Pablo Parisi. I read this book January 1st. So this book was a pretty short graphic novel biography about the artist Basquiat. And I thought it was a pretty good book. It didn't have a lot of information. I felt like it was pretty short information wise and it could have had more, but I understand what it was going for. This is Poppy. You're gonna come say hi? Come here. She doesn't want to say hi. She just wants to sit out of frame and make me look weird. Huh? Oh. Yes, chic. And then the second book that I read this year was Violet Bent Over the Grass by Lana Del Rey. I have been a Lana Del Rey fan since I was probably 13 or 14, so over 10 years at this point. Oh, that makes me so old. And I was able to get her poetry book from the library, and it was exactly what I was expecting. It was, from my perspective, it felt kind of amateur considered to her like lyrics, but I understand the story she was trying to go for. I'm sorry I'm not showing pictures of the books. I get a lot of my books from the library and I'm also in a different state than where a lot of my books actually reside. So yeah. Okay, I'll rate them 1 out of 5. No, I'm not gonna do that. It seems like it'd be too much thinking work. But yeah, that was book number 2. Book number 3 was Forest Bathing Retreat by Fries. I didn't write a first name for any of these because I'm dumb, so we'll see if I can remember. That was a pretty short book though, and it was about kind of going into the forest and trying to find your peace just by being in the wilderness. And I felt like that's kind of an old idea, but also pretty new. That seems to be circulating around again, where being in nature is healing, but it's kind of missing the point on like ecotourism, just going places because they're good for have a beautiful environment, kind of misses out on the fact that a lot of these activities damage the places to begin with. So ecotourism leads to a damaged ecosystem, but you can't really protect the area if people aren't paying to protect it, which they won't if they can't go there. So it's kind of, ow, it's kind of a big circle. Okay, book number 4, Only the Devil is Here by Michelle. That one, again, a pretty short book. That one, basically, this boy kind of gets chosen to become like the next Lucifer, and a demon has to hunt him down, but ends up protecting him. It's kind of like Grogu in The Mandalorian, and yeah, I thought it was gonna be cannibals. He kind of lined it up for it to be like a cannibal situation, but it never went there, and I was honestly a bit disappointed with the literature story. Like, I felt like if they would have added that, it would have made it a lot more horrendous, the point he was trying to make about how humans are awful but not all humans are bad. So that was pretty good. And then let's see, book number 5 was English Renaissance Poetry collected by Williams. So I think I'd been reading this book for 2 or 3 years, so I had finally finished it. It was pretty big. It was about 600 pages, I think, and it was a collection of a lot of English Renaissance poetry. And I really do enjoy Renaissance poetry, but some of those some of those authors kind of drag on and on and on and on. So that was a pretty good book. The next one was Missing Person by Muldoon. That one was translated from its original French, and I feel like it lost maybe some of its storytelling in the translation, because it felt kind of awkward in certain scenes. Like there's things that were supposed to be there that never showed up. Okay. Book number 7, A Court of Thorns and Roses. And that was in early February. So that's around the time I got really into BookTok on TikTok. And I got that as an audiobook. And I have to say, I really hated the first book. I would give it a 0 out of 5. I don't know why. I think it was the audio book author's voice, but it just made me hate Farah. Once I started reading the books in like physical book form, this is a random book, but once I read the physical books, I could kind of like it, but it took me 2 or 3 books into the series after the first one to kind of get over Farah's voice, because I would hear it in my head. I'm like, oh, it's so irritating. But yeah. And then book number 8, Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I again listened to this one as an audiobook. I have to say, I think it added to the experience. I put it, Turtles All the Way Down is about a character who has OCD and kind of her struggle with that while coming to terms with losing, and kind of how friendships grow as you change from a child to an adult. And I read that. I listened to that on 2 times speed and kind of added to her experience, because I felt her anxiety with how fast the book was being read to me. I was like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? It just moved so quickly. And then the next one was Love by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison, amazing author. Don't really have anything else to say. Enjoyed the book. After that was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I don't really understand the titles of Hank Green's books, but that book, so it's kind of science fiction and social media. And I read that book and I was like, he really knows what he's talking about when it comes to social media, because like John and Hank Green are the OGs of YouTube. And this book kind of about not wanting to be famous, but then once you get the attention, you kind of want it so bad that you'll do anything to get it and keep it. And I really enjoyed hearing that from his perspective. Then after that, I read Red, White, and Royal Blue by, I think it's Casey Quinston. I didn't write the first name, but Quinston. That was a pretty good book. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I feel like it told its story well. There's a lot of drama, a lot of high points. It felt very like AO3 2012, if that makes any sense. After that, I read Vicious by V. Schwab. That book, I just have to say, chef's kiss. It had like all those action points where there really wasn't a character that was good in that book. The person who you come to like enjoy, that you're rooting for, isn't a good person, but the person who society would root for isn't a good person either. So you're just kind of like, when was the last time I read a book where there wasn't a declared good or bad person in the narrative, where they're all kind of bad and you have to choose? And then you realize, have I been doing that with everything? Have they all been bad and I've just been making that conscious decision to pick the one I think is not the worst, but not the best? And then after that, I read Wilder Girls. I think they're turning this one into a TV show, which I'm really excited about. I really enjoyed that book. I think I read it in like 2 hours. I was just like, I need to know what happens. So it's this girls' boarding school that become isolated after they've been exposed to some kind of virus, and basically about how they realize they've been locked down in an experiment. And I'm really excited. There's a sequel that I think is coming out or has came out that I really want to get my hands on so I can see what actually happens after what happened. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's a really good book. And then after that, I read A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem by Collins. So I got this book from Target, and it was pretty good. It wasn't as like scandalous as I was thinking it was gonna be. It's basically this woman who, again, she's a lady, but she has to solve a mystery. It's kind of like maybe Enola Holmes from Netflix, but not exactly. And then I got Written in the Stars by Belle Fleur. This one was it's like a queer romance that I really enjoyed. It was women, and I really, the drama, there's so much drama and kind of like social media and what happens when two people who wouldn't really work together and like their whole relationship. And then These Rebel Waves by Rash. Her name has two A's, R-A-A-S-C-H. I don't know if it's Rash or some other way, but I really enjoyed that one. I think that was that one. Yes, that one is where there's a prince, a rebel daughter, the rebel's daughter, who kind of like realizes what she's fighting for may not have been something she should have been at her age, and a pirate king all coming together to like fight the evil church religion. I really like that one. And then Sky in the Deep, that's the Viking one by Young. So that kind of is, it kind of hits a lot of book talk tropes, which is enemies to lovers. And I felt like Young did that pretty well. And then The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Loved that book. I have to say, it wasn't what I was expecting, but I got through it in like a day. I read it after 2 hours. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get the other ones so I can see what happens next. Then after that, number 19 was Court of Mist and Fury by Mass. That one was a lot better, I think, as it moved on. Like, again, it was an audiobook. And I kind of hated it at first, and then I got the physical book, and I was like, okay, this is better. And then after that, I read Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. I pre-ordered this book. I know we hate Cassandra Clare in the book community, but her books are so addicting. It's so addicting. Wait, what's that? Wait 1 second. I don't know if it was that one I pre-ordered or a different one I pre-ordered, but that one was very good. And then it was like a lot, again, it reminded me of fan fiction with how much fluff there is, like how much build up there was, and you don't get action until like the last 100 pages. And then after that, I read Girl Serpent Thorn by Bachelor. I don't know how her last name. I wrote it, but I don't know what I wrote. That one was very good. That one is this girl, she's told she's cursed and anyone who will touch her will die. And kind of how she's learning that what she thought was a curse might not have been that, and kind of her family interactions and her dealing with confidence and self-worth and being able to speak about her issues. And I feel like that's kind of a good book. It's kind of like a modern fairy tale. I feel like that and Cinderella would go along well together. Then book number 22 was A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor by Hank Green. So that is a Absolutely Remarkable Things sequel. And I have to say, I think the first book was better, but the second book did tie up the story pretty well. I feel like they kind of ran a similar path when it came to pacing and then the plot. And I mean, it is a sequel, so I probably should have expected that, but it had a good ending. I like how he resolved all the issues with the characters and how it concluded. Then after that, I read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, and that is part of her, one of her series that I read this year, and I really enjoyed it. It's about this person who's able to walk through different Londons. So there's a red London, a white London, and I think a black London, and they all deal with magic differently, and kind of like that kind of thing, like the different London politics, magic, friendship, family. I really enjoyed it. And then A Curse So Dark and Lonely. That one I think was a Sleeping Beauty rewrite by Kamer. And I think it was pretty good. It kind of talks about like the princess not really being a princess and kind of how there's really no consent given on Sleeping Beauty's terms when it comes to curing someone else's curse. And I really liked that. And then I read number 25 was Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Koss. So that one is like a lesbian romance story in the 1950s, I think, in San Francisco. And I really like the storytelling. You really get to know the character and you kind of fall in love with her, and then you feel for her whole journey and how she deals with her family and how she makes friends and how she enters the community that she finds, like where she thought she was so alone before, but she realizes she isn't as alone as she thought she was. Then 26 was Least Divided Shores, which was the sequel to these Rebel Waves. I really like how that kind of concluded the story, and it kind of tied up the loose ends. And then 27 was Wicked Fox by Cho. That one was set in Seoul, Korea, and it kind of has to do with a kitsune, so a fox spirit, and a young girl, and her meeting this boy who kind of is falling apart in life, but who's doing what he can, not doing the most, but just doing the basic of what he can, and him learning that he should be able to probably do more for those around him. And she also realizes that she needs to stand up for herself when it comes to her family. Then I read Her Royal Highness by Hawkins. That one is pretty short. It is a lesbian romance in like a high school boarding school in Scotland with a girl who leaves her home in America because she gets a scholarship. I think it's pretty entertaining. It isn't the best story I've heard, but it tells the story. It's start, middle, end. After that, number 29 was Thirsty by Madeline Miller. This book, I don't know, there's just something about Madeline Miller's writing that just drives me crazy. It was so beautifully written that you fall into the story and you don't realize until you close the page at the end what's happened. I couldn't put it down. I was just like, what happens next? Even though the story is thousands of years old and I'm like reading it for the first time from Miller's pages, and I was just like, this is, her work is beautiful, it's amazing. 10 out of 10 stars. It might be one of my favorite reads of the year. After that, I read Boyfriend Material by Hall. This one was very popular on Book Talk. I feel that I saw it on a lot of recommendation lists. I saw it a lot online. I saw it a lot on YouTube, and I didn't like it. I feel like with a lot of like LGBTQTA books, people say they like it just because it is representation, but you don't have to like it just because it is representation. You can be critical of works. And I don't know if I didn't like it. It was written well. I think it's just, I didn't like the characters. They felt, I know it felt real and it communicated the story pretty well, but the character was very toxic, and I feel like it did some damage with his identity and kind of how he behaved, how he kind of used excuses about his own self to validate his toxic behavior in the story. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. And then I read Bonecryer's Moon by Purdy. I really liked that one. It was short, sweet. Then I read A Court of Wings and Ruin by Mass. It's a lot like her other ones. Then of course The Frost and the Starlight, A Court of Silver Flames. I really like Silver Flames. I got this book right when it came out. And I really like Nesta's story and how she kind of climbed her mountain and made female friends after everything that she went through. And then I read A Gathering of Shadows and A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. That's her sequel and the third book in her one series, the Shade of Magic series. Really enjoyed those. I feel like if you like Percy Jackson, you would probably like those. It's like Percy Jackson for a little bit older kids. And then I read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I don't know what I wrote, but I know she wrote the books that the Shadow and Bone series was inspired by. That's why I read that book, and it was pretty good. It felt kind of juvenile. I feel like it fit well in with like Mass's books or Percy Jackson. I don't know if maybe it's because I'm becoming older, but the books just aren't hitting the same, or maybe it's just I've read so many of them that they're just not what I'm looking for anymore. Then I read A Dance of Thieves by Pearson. I think I've read this book 3 or 4 times, not on purpose, but by accident, because every year or so I'll go to the library and I'll see that book. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. I'll rent it out, read it. I'll get like 20 pages into it. And I'm like, did I read this before? And I'll read it to the end and I'm like, I've read that before. So it's kind of forgettable, but you'll enjoy remembering it. Then I read The Wicked King by Holly Black. I thought it was pretty good. Kind of continue the story and we kind of get to see where Jude's going. Then Renegades by Marissa Miller. I really like Marissa Meyer. I really like Meyer's work. She wrote the retold stories of the classical princesses. So like Cinderella became Cinder, and Sleeping Beauty and all of those. I really like that series. I read those as they were coming out, and I think Meyer is just really good at telling a story and having characters that are memorable and important. But Renegades is basically about basically what happens when superheroes and villains kind of take over, and kind of like we get one point of view where the heroes are the most important people in this society, but it kind of has normal people who aren't heroes or villains just left awaiting to be helped. And I really like how she kind of talks about that through her main character. Then I read Magic, Dark and Strange by Powell. Again, I felt like I think that was her first novel. It was pretty good. It told the story. It's about like a magic clock that brings back the dead and kind of changing your time for other people's time and all of that. And then I read The Red Pyramid by Rick Riordan. I've been reading that book for 2 or 3 years at this point. I was just trying to like, we're gonna finish it, we're gonna get through it. I feel like Rick Riordan's best books were the ones that focused on his Greek and Roman stories. I don't know if that's maybe because I was connected already to those characters, but how he tried to talk about like Sadie and her relationship with like a god. Sadie's 13 and he's trying to like set it up for her to be in a relationship with someone who's thousands of years old. Felt kind of weird. Then I read The Raven Boys by Cypher. The Raven Boys. I really enjoyed that book. It was very good. And then I read To Kill a Kingdom by Christo, and that book was very surprising. You kind of get like the typical enemies to lovers, except they don't know, the prince doesn't know that they're enemies at first, and then it's like turns into like, can you trust the person you've been raised to defeat and that you've been defeating? And then I read Life and Death by Marissa Meyer. So that is, I haven't read the original Twilight books. I will say that now. But this is, Life and Death is Twilight if Bella was a boy and Edward was a girl. And I saw it at Target and I'm like, huh. And I bought it. It was like $8. I'm like, for $8, I want to be entertained this weekend. And it was a very bad read, but very enjoyable. And sometimes that's what you need. And then after that, I probably read again one of my favorite books of the year, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Reed. That book, like Madeline Miller, she just writes so well and it's so enjoyable. to see how she explores this main female character and her relationships with those around her and her self-worth. And I really liked seeing how she grew Evelyn Hugo as a character and how she has her interact with her own story being told, because she's telling her own story and how it's being told and kind of how it's going to benefit not only her, but maybe those that the story will be told to. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm just going to say that. Very enjoyed it a lot. It was very good. Number 47, we're getting there. Number 47 was Sweet and Bitter Magic by Tuli. This was kind of like Her Royal Highness. It's kind of enemies to lovers. So we have this one girl who, she is a witch, but she got like banned from her coven area. I don't know if that's the right word, but she got banned, and then she ends up like living in normal people, doing like tricks out of her hut. And then some kind of magical disease spreads over this land, and this other girl comes in and she's just like, we need to fix this because it's affecting my dad. And so they go and make this whole journey, and there's I think a one bed trope. It's very cute. It's very romantic. I really enjoyed that one. And then after that, I read The Dream Thieves, Blue Lily, Lily Blue, and then The Raven King by Stifer. So that was like the end of the Raven Boys series. I read those 3 books the same day. I had to know how that story was going to end. I'm kind of sad that I did that because I was like, oh, I could have spread it out and enjoyed it much longer, but I had to know how it ended. And all I have to say is, it was very good. Would recommend. Then number 51 was The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. So I think that's the ending of like Jude Deonte's story from the Cruel Prince series. I think that there might be other ones that kind of connect, but I haven't read those. I would recommend it. I really like how she ended it out. Then I read Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer, which is the sequel to Renegades. It kind of continued the story, and I'm not going to say anything because I won't spoil it because that's how sequels work. But very good. And then Book Talk got me here. I kept seeing videos about Ice Planet Barbarians, and I read them. I read Ice Planet Barbarians, Barbarian Alien, the Honeymoon ones. Yeah, let's just say those are the books I read from 53 to 61. So that's me caught up. Currently, I'm reading the next one in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. The Graveyard Book, The Flame by Leonard Cohen. The Art of Dramatic Writing. Right. And then Creative, the Everything Creative Writing book. So those are the 5 books. Oh wait. And I'm reading, it's one of the books connected to Shadow and Bone. It's one of those ones by Leigh Bardugo. So the 6 books I'm currently reading that I hope to add in the next couple of days to this list so it balances out. So hope maybe that I'll get to 100 books by the end of the year. That'll be a big accomplishment. I think I wrote that down a couple years ago. One day read 100 books a year. I think I only read 30 or 40 last year. I spent a lot of last year reading articles and parts of textbooks for my degree, but I didn't read like books. So yeah, I think 61 is pretty good for this far into the year. And I hit my goal, which was 52. But I'm kind of happy with how far I've gotten, and I'm excited to see where I go. Drop a comment down below if you liked any of these books, and if you didn't, if you think what I thought was silly, I just want to hear what you think. Okay, like and subscribe. Bye!